The telegram arrived on a Thursday afternoon in late August 1878, and it changed everything for Beatrice Renwick before she even broke the wax seal. The bank was calling in her loan, effective in 30 days. Standing in her modest dress shop on the dusty main street of Silverton, Colorado, she felt the weight of impending ruin settle on her shoulders like a wool cloak in summer. The afternoon sun streamed through her front window, illuminating the careful rows of fabric bolts and the 3 finished dresses hanging on display, each one a testament to countless hours of work that now seemed destined to amount to nothing at all. Beatrice read the telegram 3 times, her fingers trembling slightly as she held the thin paper. The words remained unchanged with each reading. Mr. Hargrove at the Silverton Bank and Trust required full payment of her outstanding loan within 30 days, or he would seize the property and all its contents. She had fallen behind on her payments, true enough, but she had never imagined the bank would act so swiftly or so ruthlessly. She was 22 years old, alone in the world since her father's death 2 years prior, and she had poured everything into this shop. Her father, a tailor by trade, had taught her the craft from childhood, and she had believed she could make a life for herself with needle and thread in this rough mining town. For a time, it had seemed possible. But the mine had closed 6 months ago, and with it went most of the prosperity that had drawn people to Silverton in the first place. Families had moved on, seeking opportunity elsewhere, and those who remained had little coin for new dresses or tailored garments. The shop bell jangled, startling her from her thoughts. She hastily tucked the telegram into her apron pocket and looked up, arranging her features into something resembling professional composure. The man who entered was tall, with shoulders that nearly brushed the doorframe. He wore dusty trail clothes, leather chaps over worn denim trousers, and a hat that had seen better days. His face was weathered and tanned, with lines around his eyes that suggested he spent his days squinting into the sun. He looked to be perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair curling slightly at his collar and a shadow of stubble along his jaw. "Good afternoon," Beatrice said, her voice steadier than she felt. "May I help you?" The man removed his hat, revealing more of his face. His eyes were a striking shade of blue, bright against his tanned skin. "Afternoon, miss. I hope I am in the right place. I need some work done on clothing, and the fellow at the general store said you might be able to help." "I can certainly try," Beatrice said, her merchant instincts rising despite her distress. "What sort of work do you need?" He pulled a bundle from under his arm and laid it on her counter. It was a shirt, or what remained of one, torn badly along one side and stained with what looked like both dirt and blood. "Got into a bit of trouble with some barbed wire fencing. This was my best shirt, and I was hoping it might be salvaged. I know it looks bad, but the fabric itself is good quality, and I would pay fair money to have it repaired if that is possible." Beatrice picked up the shirt and examined it carefully. The tear was extensive, running from the shoulder seam nearly to the hem, but the fabric was indeed good quality cotton, far better than most working men wore. The bloodstain was old and dried, likely from whatever accident had caused the tear. "I can repair this," she said slowly. "It will take some careful work to make the mend nearly invisible, but it can be done." "How much would you charge?" the man asked, watching her face carefully. She calculated quickly, thinking of the telegram in her pocket and her empty ledger book. She should charge at least $2 for this kind of detailed work, but something about his steady gaze made her honest. $2, but I could have it ready for you in 3 days." He nodded, reaching into his vest pocket and pulling out several coins. To her surprise, he counted out 4 silver dollars and placed them on the counter. 2 for the work and 2 in advance for another job. I need 2 new shirts made, good sturdy cotton like this one. I can pay the balance when they are finished." Beatrice stared at the coins as if they might disappear. $4 was more than she had taken in during the past 2 weeks combined. "I would need to measure you for the new shirts," she said, her mind already racing ahead to the work, to the pattern cutting and stitching. "Of course," he said. "I am Isaac Ramsey, by the way. I have a ranch about 15 miles north of here, up in the valley. I do not get to town often, but when I do, I would appreciate having someone I can rely on for this sort of work." "Beatrice Renwick," she said, extending her hand. His grip was firm and calloused, the hand of a man who worked with rope and leather and tools. "I would be grateful for your business, Mr. Ramsey." "Just Isaac, please," he said with a slight smile that softened the weathered planes of his face. "I am not much for formality." She fetched her measuring tape and her notebook, trying to ignore the flutter of nervousness in her stomach as she approached him. She had measured men before, of course, but usually older gentlemen or boys accompanying their mothers. Something about Isaac's quiet presence made her acutely aware of the impropriety of the situation, though she pushed the thought aside. She was a professional, and this was business. "Arms out, please," she said, and he complied, standing patiently as she measured across his shoulders, down his arms, around his chest and waist. She worked quickly and efficiently, noting the measurements in her book. He was broader through the shoulders than most men, and his arms were heavily muscled, likely from years of ranch work. She tried not to think about the warmth of him or the faint scent of leather and sage that clung to his clothes. "What color fabric would you prefer?" she asked, stepping back and consulting her mental inventory. "What would you recommend?" he asked. She considered him for a moment, tilting her head. "Dark blue would suit you well, I think, or a deep gray. Both would wear well and hide the dust of the range." "Then I will take one of each," he said. "You have good taste, I can see that much." The compliment, simple as it was, brought unexpected warmth to her cheeks. "Thank you. I will have everything ready within the week." "No rush," he said, settling his hat back on his head. "I trust your work, Miss Renwick. I can tell quality when I see it." After he left, Beatrice stood for a long moment staring at the $4 on her counter. They represented the first real hope she had felt since receiving the telegram. It was not enough to save her shop, not nearly enough, but it was something. It was a beginning. She spent the rest of the afternoon working on Isaac's torn shirt, carefully picking out the damaged stitching and preparing the fabric for repair. The work soothed her, as it always did. There was a meditation in the repetitive motion of needle through cloth, a sense of order being restored to something broken. If only the rest of her life could be mended so easily. That evening, as the sun set over the San Juan Mountains and painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Beatrice sat at her small table in the back room of her shop and did calculations in her ledger. She owed the bank $300. She had $27 in savings. Even with Isaac's deposit, she was nowhere close to what she needed. At her current rate of income, she would need years to make up the difference, and the bank had given her 30 days. She could sell the shop's contents, perhaps, but that would barely make a dent in the debt, and then she would have nothing at all. She could try to find work elsewhere, but doing what? Silverton was not a place that offered many opportunities for respectable single women. She could cook or clean or take in washing, but those jobs were already claimed by the women who had been here longer. The tears came then, hot and frustrated, sliding down her cheeks as she sat alone in the gathering darkness. She had tried so hard, had worked such long hours, had been so careful with every penny. And still, it was not enough. The world was not kind to women trying to make their own way, and she was learning that lesson in the hardest way possible. But crying accomplished nothing. Her father had taught her that much. He had been a practical man, steady and reliable, and he would have told her to dry her eyes and find a solution. So she dried her eyes and went to bed, though sleep was long in coming. Isaac returned 4 days later, earlier than she had expected. She was working on one of his new shirts when the bell jangled, and she looked up to find him filling her doorway once again. He looked cleaner this time, freshly shaved, his hair still damp as if he had just bathed. "Good morning," she said, setting aside her work. "I have your repaired shirt ready, and I am making good progress on the new ones." "I am glad to hear it," he said, "but I have actually come for a different reason. I was wondering if you might be able to make curtains." "Curtains," she repeated, surprised. He looked slightly uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "I know it is not your usual work, but I have recently finished building a proper house on my ranch, and it needs curtains for the windows. I have 4 windows, 2 in the main room and 1 each in the 2 bedrooms. I would pay good money for the work." Beatrice's mind raced. Curtains meant buying fabric in bulk, which meant a larger commission for her. "I can certainly make curtains," she said carefully. "Would you want something simple, or would you prefer something more decorative?" "Whatever you think best," he said. "I confess I do not know much about such things. I just know that a proper house should have curtains, and I would like to have them done well." "I would need to see the windows to measure them properly," she said. "Of course," Isaac said. "Would you be willing to come out to the ranch? I could bring you out tomorrow morning and have you back before dark." The suggestion was highly irregular, but then again, everything about her situation was irregular, and she needed the work desperately. "That would be acceptable," she said. "What time should I be ready?" "I will come by at 8 o'clock if that suits you." "That will be fine." After he left, Beatrice allowed herself a small smile. More work meant more money, and every dollar brought her slightly closer to saving her shop. It was still not enough, not nearly enough, but it was something. That night, she packed a small bag with her measuring tools, notebook, and samples of fabric. She chose her clothing carefully, knowing she would need something practical for travel, but still professional enough to maintain her dignity. She settled on a simple dark green dress with a modest bustle, practical boots, and a wide-brimmed hat to protect her from the sun. Isaac arrived promptly at 8 the next morning, driving a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 bay horses. He helped her up onto the seat with easy courtesy, and soon they were rolling north out of Silverton, following the road that wound up into the mountains. The morning was beautiful, clear and cool, with the promise of heat later in the day. The aspens were just beginning to show hints of gold among their green leaves, heralds of the autumn to come. The road was rough but well maintained, clearly used regularly by ranchers bringing cattle or supplies to and from town. "How long have you had your ranch?" Beatrice asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "I bought the land 3 years ago," Isaac said, keeping his eyes on the road. "Spent the first 2 years building up the herd and living in a line shack that was barely more than 4 walls and a roof. This past year, I finally had enough saved to build a proper house. Finished it about a month ago. That must have been difficult work, building a house on your own." "I had help," he said. "There are a few other ranchers in the valley, and we help each other when big jobs need doing. They helped me with the house, and I will help them when they need it. That is how things work out here." "You run the ranch alone otherwise?" "Mostly," he said. "I have a hired man, Tom, who helps with the cattle. He has his own cabin on the property, but the day-to-day work is mostly mine." "It sounds like a hard life." He glanced at her, and she saw something shift in his expression. "It is hard," he admitted, "but it is mine. I grew up working for other men, taking their orders, living by their rules. Now I make my own choices for better or worse. That means something to me." She understood that more than he might realize. "I know what you mean," she said softly. "I feel the same way about my shop." They rode in silence for a while longer, the wagon creaking and swaying over the uneven road. The valley opened up before them, wide and green, ringed by towering mountains still capped with snow despite the late summer heat. A creek ran through the valley, its water sparkling in the sunlight, and she could see cattle scattered across the grassland. Isaac's house stood on a slight rise, overlooking the valley. It was built of logs, solid and well constructed, with a wide porch across the front and a stone chimney rising from one end. It was not large, but it looked like a real home, built with care and meant to last. "It is a fine house," Beatrice said as they approached. "Thank you," Isaac said, and she could hear the pride in his voice. "I am pleased with how it turned out." He helped her down from the wagon and led her inside. The interior was sparse but clean, with a large main room that served as kitchen and living space combined, and two smaller bedrooms opening off to one side. The floors were made of smooth pine planks, and there was a large stone fireplace on one wall. The furniture was simple but well made. A table with 4 chairs, a rocking chair by the fireplace, a sideboard against one wall. What struck her most was how empty it felt. This was a house built for a family, but Isaac lived here alone, and the emptiness of it seemed to echo in the bare windows and unused space. She pushed the observation aside and focused on her work, moving from window to window with her measuring tape and notebook. "I would recommend a heavier fabric for these," she said, gesturing to the main room windows. "Something that will block the cold in winter and the heat in summer. For the bedrooms, perhaps something lighter, more decorative." "Whatever you think best," Isaac said. He was leaning against the doorframe, watching her work with an expression she could not quite read. "I can show you some fabric samples when we return to town," she said. "That way you can choose the colors you prefer." "I trust your judgment," he said. "Choose whatever you think will look best." She made careful notes of all the measurements. Then they returned to the wagon. On the ride back to town, she found herself chatting more easily with him, telling him about her father and how he had taught her the tailoring trade, about the challenges of running her own business in a town as rough as Silverton. She did not mention the telegram or the impending loss of her shop. That was her burden to bear, and she would not share it with a man who was, ultimately, still a stranger. Even if he was a kind one. When they reached Silverton, Isaac helped her down from the wagon and walked her to her shop door. "I will be back in a few days for the shirts," he said. "And whenever you are ready to discuss the curtains, I will come by." "Thank you for the commission," Beatrice said. "I appreciate your business." He tipped his hat to her and returned to his wagon, and she watched him drive away with a strange mixture of feelings she could not quite name. He was becoming more than just a customer, she realized. He was becoming something like a friend, and in her lonely life, that was a precious thing. Over the next week, she threw herself into her work with renewed determination. She finished both of Isaac's shirts, putting extra care into every seam and buttonhole. She went to the general store and selected the best fabrics she could find for his curtains, choosing a deep burgundy for the main room and a lighter cream with tiny blue flowers for the bedrooms. Other customers trickled in as well, drawn perhaps by the sight of her working late into the evening, her lamp burning bright in the window. A miner's wife brought in a torn pair of trousers to be patched. A prospector needed a new vest. A widow commissioned a mourning dress. Each job was small, but together, they added up to a few more dollars in her cash box. But the days were slipping away, and her 30-day deadline was approaching with terrible speed. She had saved nearly $60 now, counting Isaac's payments, but she was still desperately short of what she needed. Isaac came by on a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 1 week after their trip to his ranch. She had his shirts wrapped in brown paper, tied with string, and she handed them to him with a sense of pride in her work. He unwrapped one of them right there in her shop, holding it up to examine it. A smile spread across his face as he ran his fingers over the careful stitching, the neat buttonholes, the perfect fit of the collar. "This is fine work," he said, "better than anything I have owned in years." "I am glad you are pleased," she said, and meant it. He paid her the balance for the shirts and then lingered, looking at the fabric she had selected for his curtains. "These are perfect," he said, touching the burgundy cloth gently. "How much will the curtains cost?" She named a fair price, expecting him to perhaps negotiate or ask for time to pay, but he simply pulled out his wallet and counted out the money, the full amount, plus an extra $20. "For the rush work," he said when she started to protest. "I know you will probably need to work late to finish them, and your time is valuable." The extra money brought tears to her eyes, though she blinked them back quickly. "Thank you," she managed. "That is very generous." "Not generous," he said quietly, "just fair." After he left, she sat down at her counter and allowed herself a moment to simply breathe. With this payment, she now had nearly $90. It was more than she had dared hope for just 2 weeks ago, but it was still only a fraction of what she needed. That evening, she walked to the bank and requested a meeting with Mr. Hargrove. The banker was a thin man with calculating eyes and a manner that suggested he viewed everything in terms of profit and loss. He listened to her request for an extension with barely concealed impatience. "Miss Renwick," he said when she finished, "I understand your situation, but the bank has obligations of its own. We have already extended you considerable leniency. The loan must be paid in full by the original deadline, or we will have no choice but to foreclose." "But I am bringing in more business now," she protested. "If you would just give me a few more months, I am certain I could pay you back in full." "The bank cannot operate on certainties," Mr. Hargrove said coldly. "We operate on facts, and the fact is that you have failed to make your payments for the past 3 months. The decision is final." She left the bank with her small hope extinguished. There would be no extension, no mercy, no reprieve. She had less than 3 weeks now, and she would need a miracle to save her shop. The miracle did not come, but Isaac did. He returned 2 days later with another commission, this time for a proper suit of clothes, the kind a man might wear to church or to town on special occasions. He needed dress shirts and trousers and a vest and a jacket, all tailored to fit properly. "I have been wearing the same old suit for the past 5 years, he explained, looking slightly embarrassed. "It is getting a bit shabby, and I thought perhaps it was time to have something new made." "I can certainly do that," Beatrice said, though her mind was reeling. "A full suit would be weeks of work and would cost a significant amount of money. But I must be honest with you, Mr. Ramsey. A proper suit will be expensive, probably $40 or $50 for all the pieces, depending on the fabric you choose." "That is fine," he said. "And I told you to call me Isaac." "Isaac," she said, and his name felt strange and intimate on her tongue. "I will need to order some of the fabric from Denver. It could take 2 weeks for it to arrive, and then another 2 weeks to complete the work." "That is no problem," he said. "I am not in a hurry," but she was in a hurry. Time was running out, and even with this commission, even with every job she could possibly take, she would not make enough money to save her shop. The realization settled over her like a heavy blanket, suffocating and inescapable. That night, alone in her room, she finally allowed herself to accept the truth. She was going to lose her shop. All her hard work, all her dreams, All her careful plans were going to amount to nothing. In 2 weeks, maybe 3, the bank would foreclose, and she would have to leave Silverton with nothing but the clothes on her back and whatever small amount she could carry away. The grief of it was overwhelming, and she cried until she had no more tears left. Then she dried her eyes, got out of bed, and went back to work. If she was going to lose everything anyway, she might as well lose it while doing the work she loved. She threw herself into making Isaac's curtains, working late into the night by lamplight. The sewing became a kind of meditation, a way to quiet the panic in her mind. She hemmed and stitched and pleated, creating something beautiful from simple cloth, and for a little while she could forget about telegrams and banks and impending ruin. Isaac came by the shop every few days, always with some new small commission. He needed handkerchiefs hemmed. He wanted a new set of work shirts. He wondered if she could embroider his initials on some collars. Each job was small, but together they kept her busy and kept money trickling into her cash box. She began to suspect that he was inventing reasons to hire her, but she said nothing. She needed the work too desperately to question his motives. 2 weeks after their trip to his ranch, she finished the curtains. They were beautiful, if she said so herself, the burgundy drapes falling in rich folds, the bedroom curtains light and cheerful with their tiny printed flowers. She wrapped them carefully, protecting them from dust, and waited for Isaac to collect them. He came that evening, just as she was about to close the shop. The sun was setting, painting the street outside in shades of orange and gold, and the air was cooling rapidly as it did in the mountains. "I have finished the curtains," she said, bringing out the wrapped packages. "Could I see them?" he asked. She unwrapped one of the burgundy panels and held it up for him to inspect. He stepped closer, running the fabric through his fingers, examining her careful stitching. He was close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, could smell the clean scent of soap and leather. "They are beautiful," he said quietly. "You do excellent work, Beatrice." It was the first time he had used her given name without the formal Miss, and the intimacy of it made her breath catch in her throat. She looked up at him and found him watching her with an expression that made her heart race. "Thank you," she whispered. For a moment, they stood there in the dimming light of her shop, close enough to touch, the air between them charged with something unspoken. Then Isaac stepped back, breaking the spell, and she felt simultaneously relieved and disappointed. "I should pay you for these," he said, his voice slightly rough. She named the price they had agreed upon, and he paid without question, adding another generous tip. "Would you be willing to come out to the ranch again?" he asked as she wrapped the curtains back up. "I would like your help hanging these, to make sure they are positioned correctly. And I could use your advice on some other matters concerning the house." Every practical instinct told her to refuse. It was improper for a single woman to visit a single man's home without a chaperone, and she had already bent the rules of propriety by going out there once. But she needed every dollar she could earn in the few days she had left, and she found herself nodding. "I could come tomorrow if that suits you." "Tomorrow would be perfect," he said. "I will pick you up at 8. That night, as she prepared for bed, she could not stop thinking about the moment in her shop, the way Isaac had looked at her, the way her name had sounded on his lips. She was in dangerous territory, she knew. She was beginning to care for him in a way that went beyond professional courtesy, and that was foolish in the extreme. In a few days, she would lose her shop and have to leave Silverton, and there was no place in that future for romantic feelings about a cowboy rancher, no matter how kind he was or how his blue eyes made her heart skip. She needed to focus on survival, on figuring out what she would do after the bank took everything. She could not afford the distraction of emotion. But when Isaac arrived the next morning, his smile bright and his manner warm. All her stern resolutions melted away like snow in summer. She climbed up onto the wagon seat beside him, and they rode north into the mountains once again, chatting easily about everything and nothing. The valley was beautiful in the morning light, the grass still wet with dew, the cattle moving slowly across the pasture. Smoke rose from the chimney of a small cabin she had not noticed on her previous visit, and Isaac explained that was where Tom, his hired man, lived. They spent the morning hanging curtains, with Isaac standing on a chair to reach the high curtain rods while Beatrice directed him, making small adjustments until everything hung perfectly. The transformation was remarkable. The curtains made the bare house feel like a home, warm and welcoming, and she could see the pleasure in Isaac's face as he looked around. "You have made this house look like a real home," he said when they finished. "I cannot thank you enough." "It was my pleasure," she said truthfully. "You have a lovely home, Isaac. You should be proud of it." They ate lunch together, simple fare of bread and cheese and cold roast beef that Isaac had prepared that morning. They sat at his table, talking easily, and for a little while, Beatrice could forget about her troubles and simply enjoy the moment. "Tell me something," Isaac said after a while, his tone careful. "Is your business doing well? I have noticed that the shop seems quiet most times I visit." The direct question caught her off guard, and she found herself unsure how to answer. She had been guarding her secret so carefully, not wanting anyone to know of her failure, but something about Isaac's gentle concern broke down her defenses. "No," she said quietly, looking down at her hands. "It is not doing well at all. What is wrong?" And so she told him. She told him about the telegram, about the bank calling in her loan, about her desperate attempts to raise enough money to save her shop. The words poured out of her in a rush, all the fear and frustration and grief she had been holding inside for weeks. When she finished, there were tears on her cheeks, and she wiped them away angrily, embarrassed by her display of emotion. Isaac was quiet for a long moment, his expression serious. "How much do you owe?" he asked finally. $300, she said. "I have managed to save about 110, but I have less than a week left. It is hopeless, Isaac. I am going to lose everything." "What will you do? After the bank forecloses, I mean." "I do not know," she admitted. "Leave Silverton, I suppose. Try to find work somewhere else. Start over somehow." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at his valley. She watched him, wondering what he was thinking, wishing she could take back her confession. She did not want his pity, did not want to be seen as a failure. "What if you did not have to leave?" he said, still looking out the window. "What do you mean?" He turned to face her, and she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. "What if I paid off your loan?" She stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What? What if I paid the bank the money you owe? You could keep your shop, keep your business." "I could not possibly accept that," she said immediately, standing up. "That is far too much money, Isaac. I could never repay you." "Then do not repay me with money," he said. "Repay me in another way." Her heart was pounding now, and she was not sure if it was from fear or hope or something else entirely. "I do not understand." He took a deep breath, and she saw that his hands were shaking slightly. "This house feels empty, Beatrice. It was built to be a home, but it is just a building with me living here alone. I need a wife. I want a family. And you need a way to save your shop and secure your future. So I am proposing a business arrangement. Marry me. In exchange, I will pay off your debt and ensure you can keep your shop. You would live here with me and be my wife in name, and over time, perhaps we could build something real together." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Marriage. He was proposing marriage, not out of love but out of practicality as a business arrangement. It was outrageous. It was improper. It was absolutely impossible. And yet, as she stood there staring at him, she found herself actually considering it. "I do not know what to say," she whispered. "Say you will think about it," Isaac said. "That is all I ask. Think about it and give me your answer when you are ready." They rode back to Silverton in near silence, both of them lost in thought. When Isaac helped her down from the wagon in front of her shop, he held her hand for just a moment longer than necessary. "I know this is unusual," he said quietly, "but I want you to know that my offer is sincere. I would treat you with respect and kindness, Beatrice. I would never make demands of you that you were not comfortable with. Whatever you decided our marriage would be, I would honor that." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and fled into her shop. Once inside, she leaned against the door, her heart racing, her mind whirling with impossible thoughts. Marriage to Isaac would solve all her immediate problems. She could keep her shop, keep her independence, keep the life she had built for herself. But marriage was supposed to be about love, about partnership and affection and shared dreams. Could she really bind herself to a man she barely knew, even if that man was kind and decent, and made her heart flutter in a way she did not quite understand? She spent the evening pacing her small room, weighing the options. If she refused his offer, she would lose everything within days. She would have to leave Silverton with nothing, start over somewhere else with no money and no prospects. The future would be terrifyingly uncertain. If she accepted, she would keep her shop but lose her independence in another way. She would be bound to Isaac, obligated to him, sharing his home and his life. There would be expectations, even if he promised to respect her wishes. Marriage was not something to be entered into lightly. But was that really true? People married for practical reasons all the time, especially out here in the West. Women married for security, men married for companionship and help with their homes. Love was a luxury, not a necessity. Perhaps a practical marriage based on mutual respect and kindness was more honest than a romantic one based on passion that might fade. And if she was being entirely honest with herself, she had to admit that Isaac attracted her in ways that went beyond gratitude for his patronage. She enjoyed his company, liked the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, appreciated his quiet competence and steady presence. He was a good man, she thought, the kind of man she might have chosen for herself under different circumstances. Could that be enough? Could respect and attraction and practical need be the foundation for a real marriage? She did not know the answer, but as the night wore on and exhaustion finally claimed her, she found herself leaning toward acceptance. What other choice did she really have? The next morning, she woke with her decision made. It was not a matter of the heart but of survival, and she would do what she needed to do to survive. She would accept Isaac's proposal on the condition that they be honest with each other about the nature of their arrangement. She would not pretend this was a love match, but she would be a good wife to him in the ways that mattered. She would keep his house, prepare his meals, care for him as best she could. And perhaps over time, affection might grow into something deeper. But Isaac did not come to her shop that day or the next. The days slipped past with agonizing slowness, and still he did not appear. She began to worry that he had reconsidered his offer, that he had realized the absurdity of proposing marriage to a woman he barely knew, and had thought better of it. Her deadline with the bank arrived with brutal finality. She had saved $137, less than half of what she owed. She spent the morning preparing for the inevitable, packing her most precious possessions into 2 small trunks, one containing her father's tools and some of her finer fabrics, the other holding her clothes and personal items. Everything else would have to be left behind. She was standing in her shop, taking one last look around at the space that had been her whole world for the past 2 years when the door opened and Isaac walked in. He looked travel-worn and exhausted, his clothes dusty, his face drawn. "I am sorry I have been away," he said without preamble. "I had to ride to Denver to arrange some financial matters. I came as quickly as I could." Hope flared in her chest, bright and painful. "Isaac, I have been to the bank," he said, pulling an envelope from his coat pocket. "I paid off your loan in full. This is the receipt, showing that you own your property free and clear." She took the envelope with shaking hands, staring at the official document as if it might disappear. It was real. He had actually done it. He had paid her debt. "I cannot accept this," she said, even as relief flooded through her. "Isaac, this is too much. I cannot possibly—" "You can," he interrupted gently. "And you will, because the alternative is unacceptable. I will not stand by and watch you lose everything you have worked for, Beatrice." "But why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why would you do this for me? You barely know me." He stepped closer, and she saw something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. "I know you better than you think," he said quietly. "I know that you work until your fingers bleed to create something beautiful. I know that you greet every customer with kindness, even when your heart is breaking. I know that you are strong and brave and determined, and that you deserve better than to have your dreams crushed by an unfeeling bank. I did this because I could, and because you deserved help, and because I wanted to." Tears were streaming down her face now, hot and uncontrollable. "I do not know how to repay you. Marry me," he said simply. "I know it is an unconventional proposal, and I know you have no reason to accept. But I meant what I said before. This house needs a woman's touch. I need a companion, someone to share my life with. And I think, perhaps, we could be happy together. You could keep your shop, work as much or as little as you wanted. I would not constrain you or limit you in any way. But I would like to know that when I come home in the evening, you would be there. That is all I ask." She looked at him, this man who had appeared in her shop just a few weeks ago and had somehow become essential to her life. He had saved her when she needed it most, had asked for nothing in return except her companionship. How could she refuse him? "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Isaac, I will marry you." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise, bright and warm and full of promise. He took her hands in his, holding them gently. "You will not regret this," he said. "I will spend every day trying to make you happy, Beatrice. That is my vow to you. And I will do the same for you," she said, and meant it with all her heart. They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the small church on the edge of Silverton. The minister was a kindly older man who asked no questions about their hasty wedding. Tom, Isaac's hired man, stood as witness, along with Mrs. Henderson, an older widow who sometimes purchased mending services from Beatrice. Beatrice wore a dress she had made herself, simple but elegant in pale blue silk, with tiny pearl buttons down the front. Isaac wore the suit she had not yet finished making for him, still wearing his old shabby jacket, but he had cleaned up well, his hair neatly trimmed, his face freshly shaved. The ceremony was brief, the words ancient and solemn. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed her gently, chastely, a mere brush of lips that nonetheless sent warmth flooding through her. They signed the marriage certificate, made it official and legal, and then they were walking out of the church into the bright afternoon sunlight as Mr. and Mrs. Isaac Ramsey. The reality of what she had done hit her as they drove north toward the ranch. She was married now, bound by law and custom to this man beside her. She would live in his house, share his life, be expected to fulfill all the duties of a wife. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "Are you all right?" Isaac asked, glancing at her with concern. "Just thinking," she said. "This all happened so fast." "We can take things as slowly as you need," he said. "There is no rush for anything. We have all the time in the world to figure out how to be married to each other." His understanding eased some of her anxiety, and she managed a small smile. "Thank you for being patient with me." "Always," he said, when they arrived at the ranch. Isaac helped her down from the wagon and then surprised her by sweeping her up into his arms. "Tradition," he explained with a grin, carrying her across the threshold of his house. Their house now, she corrected herself mentally. This was her home now. He set her down gently in the main room, and she looked around with new eyes. The burgundy curtains she had made hung at the windows, rich and warm in the afternoon light. The house was clean and tidy, clearly prepared for her arrival. On the table was a vase of wildflowers, their bright colors cheerful against the dark wood. "I know it is not much," Isaac said, suddenly sounding uncertain, "but I hope you will be comfortable here." "It is lovely," she said honestly. "Truly, Isaac, you have made it welcoming." He showed her through the house again, this time pointing out where he had made space for her things. One of the bedrooms had been prepared for her, with fresh linens on the bed and an empty wardrobe waiting for her clothes. The other bedroom, his, was across the main room, providing them with privacy and distance. "I thought this arrangement would be most comfortable for you," he explained. "Your room is yours entirely. I will not intrude on your space unless you invite me to." The relief she felt at this pronouncement told her that she had made the right choice. Isaac was a man of his word, and he would respect the boundaries she needed. "Thank you," she said softly. "That first evening was strange and wonderful and awkward all at once." They moved around each other carefully, learning the rhythms of sharing space. Beatrice cooked dinner using the supplies Isaac had stocked in his kitchen, and they ate together at his table, talking about inconsequential things, both of them avoiding the weight of the enormous change they had just made. After dinner, Isaac went out to check on the cattle while Beatrice unpacked her trunks and arranged her belongings in her new room. When he returned, she was sitting in the rocking chair by the fireplace, mending one of his work shirts by lamplight. "You do not have to do that," he said, settling into a chair across from her. "I want to," she said. "It feels good to have something useful to do with my hands." They sat together in comfortable silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the whisper of her needle through cloth. It felt domestic and peaceful, and Beatrice found herself relaxing into the moment. This could work, she thought. This strange marriage of convenience and necessity could actually become something real and good. They had started with honesty and respect, and that was more than many marriages had. The rest would come with time. Over the following weeks, they settled into a routine. Isaac rose before dawn to tend to the cattle and see to the endless work of running a ranch. Beatrice kept the house, cooked the meals, and made the journey into Silverton 3 times a week to open her shop and serve any customers who came. Isaac insisted on driving her to town and picking her up again, unwilling to let her make the long trip alone. He would occupy himself with errands and supplies while she worked, and then they would ride home together in the evening, talking about their days. Her business began to pick up again, as word spread that she was still operating. She took on new commissions, built new relationships with customers, and slowly rebuilt her reputation and her savings. Every dollar she earned went into a jar in her room, money that was entirely hers, a security she had never had before. But more than the security, more than the stability, she found herself growing genuinely fond of Isaac. He was unfailingly kind, thoughtful in small ways that touched her heart. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow. He fixed the hinge on her sewing box without being asked. He listened when she talked about her work, asked questions, showed genuine interest in what mattered to her, and she found herself doing small things for him in return. She mended his clothes with extra care, adding small touches of embroidery or decorative stitching. She learned to cook the foods he particularly enjoyed. She kept his house not just clean but welcoming, adding small touches of beauty and comfort wherever else she could. They were becoming true partners, she realized, even if they still maintained separate rooms and a careful physical distance. The marriage that had started as a business arrangement was transforming into something deeper, something that felt increasingly like a real partnership. One evening in late October, as the first snow of the season began to fall outside, Isaac came in from his work looking troubled. Beatrice was cooking dinner and she turned from the stove to look at him with concern. "What is wrong?" she asked. He hung up his coat and hat, brushing snow from his shoulders. "Tom is leaving," he said. "His brother back in Kansas is sick and he needs to go home to help with the family farm. I cannot fault him for it, but it means I will be running this ranch alone through the winter." "How difficult will that be?" "Very," he admitted. "Winter ranching is hard work. The cattle need constant care and there are always problems that need solving. With two of us, it was manageable. Alone, it will be brutal." "Then you will not be alone," Beatrice said decisively. "I will help you." "Beatrice, ranch work is not, I know it is not what I am trained for," she interrupted. "But I am strong and I am capable of learning. You will teach me what I need to know and together we will manage. That is what partners do." Something shifted in his expression, a warmth and gratitude that made her heart skip. "Partners," he repeated softly. "Yes, that is what we are we not?" "We are," she confirmed. So she learned to be a rancher's wife in truth. Isaac taught her to ride, patiently correcting her posture and grip until she could sit a horse with confidence. He showed her how to check the cattle, how to spot signs of illness or injury, how to mend fences and break ice on the water troughs. She proved to be a quick study, and though the work was hard and cold and often exhausting, she found satisfaction in it. She closed her shop for the winter months, unable to make the journey to town in the heavy snow. But she continued to work on her sewing, taking commissions from Isaac's neighbors and ranching friends. The work was steady if not spectacular, and she was content. As winter deepened and the snow piled high around the house, she and Isaac were forced into closer proximity. The weather was too harsh to spend much time outside, and they passed long evenings together by the fire, talking and reading and simply being together. It was during one of these evenings, with a blizzard howling outside and the fire burning bright, that Isaac first took her hand. It was a small gesture, his rough, calloused fingers interlacing with hers, but it felt momentous. She looked up at him, meeting his eyes, and saw everything she felt reflected back at her. "I know this marriage started as an arrangement," Isaac said quietly, "but somewhere along the way it became real for me. You became real for me, Beatrice. I do not want separate rooms anymore. I do not want the careful distance we have been maintaining. I want a real marriage with you in every sense, but only if that is what you want too." Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I want that too," she whispered. "I think I have wanted it for a while now, but I was afraid to say so, afraid you might not feel the same way." "I feel the same way," he said, leaning closer. "I am falling in love with you, Beatrice. Maybe I have been since the first day I walked into your shop." "I am falling in love with you too," she admitted, and it felt like a confession and a celebration all at once. When he kissed her this time, it was nothing like their chaste wedding kiss. This was deep and hungry and full of all the longing they had been carefully suppressing. She melted into him, her arms going around his neck, and for a long, wonderful moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them and the heat building between them. That night, She did not return to her separate room. She went with Isaac to his bedroom, and there in the darkness and warmth, they made their marriage real in the most fundamental way. He was gentle with her, patient and careful, and when she cried out in pleasure and wonder, he held her close and whispered words of love against her skin. Afterwards, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Beatrice felt a peace and contentment she had never known before. This was home, she thought. Not the house, not the ranch, but this man beside her. He was her home now. Winter eventually gave way to spring, and with the warming weather came new challenges and new joys. The cattle had survived the harsh months well, and several of the cows gave birth to healthy calves. Beatrice reopened her shop in town, and business was better than ever. Isaac hired a new hand to replace Tom, a young man named Peter who proved hard-working and reliable. Life settled into a rhythm that was both busy and deeply satisfying. Beatrice divided her time between the ranch and her shop, between her roles as wife and businesswoman, and found that she could be both. Isaac supported her work completely, never suggesting that she should abandon her shop or limit her ambitions. In August, exactly 1 year after that fateful telegram that had changed everything, Beatrice realized she was pregnant. She told Isaac one evening after dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. For a moment, he simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then a smile spread across his face, bright and joyous, and he pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby." "We are," she confirmed, laughing at his exuberance. "You have made me the happiest man alive," he said, setting her down gently and cupping her face in his hands. "I love you so much, Beatrice. You and this baby, you are everything to me." "And you are everything to me," she said, and sealed the words with a kiss. Their son was born the following spring, a healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him James, after Beatrice's father, and he became the center of their world. Beatrice continued to work at her shop, bringing baby James with her and setting up a cradle in the back room where he could sleep while she sewed. The years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their growing family. A daughter followed James, a bright-spirited girl they named Sarah. Then another son, Robert, who was quieter and more thoughtful. Their house, once so empty, now rang with the sounds of children laughing and playing. Beatrice's shop continued to thrive, and she eventually took on an apprentice, a young woman from town who showed talent with a needle. The business grew beyond what she had ever imagined in those dark days when she thought she would lose everything. Isaac's ranch prospered as well, the herd growing, the land producing well. He became known throughout the valley as a fair and honest man, someone whose word could be trusted absolutely. Together, they became pillars of their community, respected and valued. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Beatrice back to Silverton for a special dinner at the hotel restaurant, leaving the children with a neighbor for the evening. As they sat across from each other at a table covered in white linen, Beatrice looked at her husband and marveled at the journey they had taken together. "You remember the day we met?" she asked, smiling at the memory. "You came into my shop with that torn shirt, and I had no idea you would change my entire life." "I remember," Isaac said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I walked into your shop looking for someone to mend a shirt, and I found my future instead. Best investment I ever made." "It was not an investment," she protested, laughing. "You saved me, Isaac. I would have lost everything if not for you." "No," he said seriously, squeezing her hand. "We saved each other, Beatrice. I was living half a life before you. I had a house but not a home, Work but not purpose, existence but not joy. You gave me all of that. You gave me everything that matters." Tears pricked at her eyes, happy tears this time, so different from the desperate tears she had cried all those years ago. "I love you," she said simply. "More than I ever thought it was possible to love another person." "And I love you," he replied. "More today than yesterday, and I will love you more tomorrow than today. That is my promise to you for the rest of our lives." They returned home that night to their 3 sleeping children and the house that had become their haven. Standing on the porch, looking out at the moonlit valley, Beatrice leaned back against Isaac's chest and sighed with contentment. The years continued to pass, bringing their share of joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges. They faced them all together, always united, always partners in the truest sense of the word. Beatrice's shop became a fixture of Silverton, known throughout the region for the quality of its work. Isaac's ranch became one of the most successful in the valley, providing well for his family and employing several hands. Their children grew and thrived. James proved to have his father's love of the land and eventually took over much of the ranch work, allowing Isaac to slow down a bit in his later years. Sarah inherited her mother's creativity and skill with needle and thread, and eventually took over the shop in Silverton, expanding it into a full dressmaking establishment. Robert became a teacher, dedicating himself to educating the children of the valley. When Isaac and Beatrice were in their 50s, they became grandparents for the first time and then again and again. Their house was often full of visiting children and grandchildren, filled with laughter and life and love. They had built something lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. On warm summer evenings, Isaac and Beatrice would sit together on their porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. They would hold hands and talk about their days, their children, their memories, comfortable in the companionship they had built over decades together. "You ever regret it?" Isaac asked one evening many years after their marriage. "The way we started, I mean." The fact that it was not a conventional romance. Beatrice considered the question seriously. "No," she said finally. "I think perhaps our way was better. We built our love slowly on a foundation of respect and partnership. We chose each other not once but every day in 1,000 small ways." "That seems more romantic to me than any whirlwind courtship could ever be." "You always were wise," Isaac said, raising her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "And you always were kind," she replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. They sat together as the sun set, and the stars came out, content in the life they had built together from what had seemed like impossible circumstances. The desperate young dressmaker losing her shop and the lonely cowboy looking for companionship had found each other and created something beautiful, something lasting, something real. When Isaac was 73 and Beatrice 70, they celebrated their golden wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The party was held at the ranch, with long tables set up in the meadow and music playing late into the night. Standing together under the stars that night, much as they had on their wedding night so many years before, Isaac pulled Beatrice close and kissed her with all the tenderness and passion of their youth. 50 years, he said wonderingly. 50 years, and I love you more now than ever." 50 years, she echoed, "and you are still the best thing that ever walked into my shop." He laughed at that, the sound rich and warm, and they danced together under the stars, 2 old people moving slowly to music only they could hear, surrounded by the family and life they had created together. Isaac passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later with Beatrice holding his hand, their children gathered around them. His last words were, "I love you," and Beatrice knew that he had lived a good life, a full life, a life without regrets. She grieved him deeply, as was right and proper, but she did not break. He had taught her too much about strength and resilience for that. She continued living at the ranch, surrounded by family, working in her garden, sewing occasionally for the joy of it rather than necessity, and telling stories to her great-grandchildren about their remarkable grandfather. She lived another 5 years, long enough to see Sarah's daughter open a third dress shop in Denver, long enough to see James's ranch expand to twice its original size, long enough to see Robert publish a book about the history of the Colorado Territory. She lived long enough to know that the legacy she and Isaac had built together would continue, strong and thriving, for generations to come. When her time finally came, she went peacefully, surrounded by loved ones, her last thoughts of Isaac and the day he had walked into her shop with a torn shirt and changed her life forever. They buried her beside him in the small cemetery overlooking the valley they had loved, 2 simple headstones side by side, marking the resting place of Isaac and Beatrice Ramsey, who had found each other when they needed it most and had built a love that lasted a lifetime. The dress shop in Silverton still stands today, operated by the 5th generation of Beatrice's descendants, a testament to the determination and skill of the young dressmaker who had refused to give up even when all seemed lost. And the ranch in the valley, now much expanded and modernized but still recognizable, continues to thrive, worked by Isaac's descendants, a testament to the vision and hard work of the cowboy who had seen potential where others saw only empty land. But more than the shop or the ranch, their true legacy was the family they had created, built on foundations of respect, partnership, and love that grew stronger with each passing year. From desperate beginnings, from a business arrangement born of necessity, they had created something beautiful and lasting. They had proven that love could be built as well as fallen into, that commitment and choice could be as powerful as passion, and that the best romances were the ones that endured through all the challenges life could throw at them. Their story became legend in Silverton, told and retold through the generations. The dressmaker who was losing her shop, and the cowboy who became her only customer until she became his wife, and then the love they built together that lasted 52 years and created a legacy that would endure for generations. It was a love story for the ages, proof that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, and that true love is not just about how you begin, but about the journey you take together, day after day, year after year, choosing each other over and over again until the very end.